Kansas basketball officially released its non-conference schedule for this upcoming season. And you look at the schedule, Kevin, it's once again a very difficult schedule. And Bill Self, I think, has really proven over the past handful of years that that's what he likes. He wants his teams to be going up against some of the best teams in the country during non-conference play. And that's going to happen again this year. You've got the exhibition at Louisville at the KFC Yum Center in Louisville. That's on the schedule. And then you look at the regular season, you're going to play the Fighting Doug Gottliebs out of Green Bay. They're on the schedule. You go at North Carolina, Texas A&M Corpus Christi, who was a tournament team from the South 2 years ago. They were in the playing games, I think, a couple of years ago. You also add in Princeton, who has been a tournament team who made a deep run, if you recall, a couple of years ago in the NCAA tournament. Duke in the Champions Classic. You've got the Players Era tournament in Las Vegas. You're going to play UConn. You've got a game against Missouri at home. You will go at NC State, which should be an interesting game considering Will Wade's first season, and Darian Williams will be there. Obviously, a player that Kansas is familiar with for the wrong reasons. Then you also play Towson and Davidson. So that's a non-conference schedule for Kansas. Again, very, very difficult. I mean, you're talking about a schedule that features numerous teams that have been Final Four teams, national championship teams over the past 5-6 years, plus some really, really good mid-major teams that have made NCAA tournament runs as well. So that's once again what Kansas' non-conference schedule is shaping up to be, is that this team, as much as we talked about it before the break with some of the new players, they're going to have to hit the ground running more than likely.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be battle tested before you even hit Champions Classic. Like that's the crazy part about it. When you look at the exhibition against Louisville, which obviously won't count, but will definitely be a chance for you to test yourself. And then the game at North Carolina. I mean, and then, you've got the Duke game, and then, the Players deal, and then UConn, I mean, it's just, there isn't a break. And I think it's really interesting, Nick, because I do think when you look at this team's chance to be really good, I do think it's still there. I think the eye of the needle, so to speak, is smaller than it would have been, obviously, had you gotten to Darian Williams. But you look at it, right, it basically stems on Darren Peterson being who everybody thinks Darren Peterson is, Flory Badunga being a first-round NBA draft pick big man, which is there for Flory, and then the other pieces kind of fitting in together around those two. And the only reason I bring that up, Nick, is you do have a lot of newer moving pieces that are trying to fit in, and that's a really tough schedule for them to try and find some footing. And on one hand, you say, hey, you can maybe not play all that well, and if you have a couple really good results that maybe you don't even expect, like, hey, UConn comes in and you beat UConn by 15 because everything's clicking in that game. That could be the game that you look back on and say, hey, that's when they figured out that they could be that type of team. The flip side of that is, Nick, if you wind up being like 2-5 or something over, those 7 or so tough games, maybe you really struggle to find a way to build momentum. And so I do think, I don't want to say it's a gamble necessarily, because that may be too strong, but I do think that there is a sort of an interesting weighing and measuring there between, hey, these guys need to get battle tested, these guys need to figure things out, and also they need to build confidence and build chemistry and all the things, to get to where you want them to be in March.
I mean, it's not at all unrealistic that Kansas could enter conference play with 4 or even 5 losses.
Yep.
I mean, that's a real possibility, which is somewhat shocking to say, but it's really, again, a reflection of the difficulty in schedule. I mean, you're talking about North Carolina, who obviously KU played in the national title game, just over 3 years ago, and has been a really solid team. You've got Duke, who was obviously in the Final Four this past year and has always been a really good team. You've got UConn, who was back-to-back national champs just a couple of years ago. You've got Missouri. That game is at home, but Missouri obviously much improved last year. We'll see what they do this year. And then you have a game at NC State, who who has maybe one of the most exciting young new head coaches in the country over there in Raleigh. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
players era, obviously, too.
yeah, plus the players era. So that is a very, very tough non-conference schedule. And again, I think it's one of those things where you could look at it and say, hey, if you get through that and pick up a couple of huge wins, right? Maybe you win at NC State, you beat UConn, maybe you beat a Duke or whatever, and you can say, all right, well, that is really, really good to see. You can go forward. Or it could be where there could be a pretty strong learning curve, and you do enter into conference play with 4 or 5 losses, and you got to figure things out from there. So, yeah, it's a very tough non-conference schedule, and it's not surprising that is the case because, again, I think Bill Self has shown over the past handful of years that he prefers it this way, and truthfully, I prefer it this way too. Like I would rather Kansas go play UConn and go play Duke and go play at NC State rather than playing 8 cupcakes in a row that gives you nothing before you get into conference play.
Well, and speaking of the conference play thing, Nick, like we've been talking about the players era. For those of you who don't know, that's kind of a Thanksgiving time period, like one of those. Here are the teams in that thing: Alabama, Auburn, Baylor from the Big 12, Creighton, Gonzaga, Houston, Iowa State, KU from the Big 12, Michigan, Notre Dame, Oregon, Rutgers, San Diego State, St. Joe's, St. John's, Syracuse, Tennessee, and UNLV. And so depending on what your matchups are there, you can wind up facing another Big 12 team there. You could wind up facing a team that's one of the top few teams in the country, depending on how you face Auburn, St. John's, one of these different teams. And so it's definitely a formula that's going to lead to you getting tested. And I think we'll find out pretty quickly. Your point was, about how last year's team, even when things were going well, they didn't always seem like they were having fun. We're going to find out if these guys like each other, pretty quickly, I feel like this season, because I think there's going to be chances for things to go wrong, and how do they respond to that adversity?
Yeah. And with the players era, you mentioned all the teams there. That's sort of basically the new NIL version of Feast Week, essentially. Like it's kind of replacing what would normally be like a Maui or a Bahamas or something like that. It's kind of essentially the new version of that. So if you're somebody who enjoys the Feast Week, participating in those types of tournaments, that's probably going out of fashion a little bit, especially for top programs who recognize that they need to generate as much NIL revenue as possible, which we're actually going to be talking more about that in just a second as well, with some of the recent news there. So that's kind of the new take on sort of the Feast Week tournament. It takes place in the same time period, but it's kind of a new-ish view on that, I guess, so to speak. But as you said, many, many tough teams will be in that tournament as well. So with the non-conference schedule shaping up as it is, again, critical that KU gets the ball rolling early if possible.